Yeah, thank you very much, Melissa. Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining today's webinar. So today I'm going to present an overview of what's new in the recently released PTC Arbortext Content Delivery 7140. And I'm also going to go through a couple of kind of deep dive details and provide some tips and tricks along the way for each one of the new features and capabilities that we delivered in this version. So with that, I'll start. So the first thing that one of the most important capabilities that we provided in this version was the single sign-on support. That's referring to an out-of-the-box capability rather than what we used to support as custom work previously. We went a long way and improved significantly the way that we allow our customers to handle customizations, and we support most of the critical things now as part of out-of-the-box offering. We also aligned a couple of things around our integration with WINDCHILL SPII or SIM, improved the way that we consume content and allow our application to consume much larger contents, especially around part lists. We improved the cloud deployment offering and introduced a couple of administration or installer related improvements for hotfixes, as well as for new software compatibility or for new third-party software that's compatible with ACD. I'll start with a deep dive into the single sign-on configuration. So before I start, I want to provide a quick overview of what is really SSO and what we try to achieve with this. So as you might know, single sign-on is an authentication scheme that allows the user to sign in with a single ID and password to any server-related independent software system. So that if you are signing, for example, to one of the PTC applications that are connected to it, then you don't need to re-authenticate to additional applications that are integrated and connected to the same single sign-on solution. And we use security assertion markup language 2 as the standard exchange for authentication and authorization identities between the security domains. And this is obviously an industry standard. We are now aligned with the industry or market needs around SSO, and we are going to, with that capability, we are going to remove the need for you to handle the cost of ownership of maintaining such a solution through custom work, and it's much more robust and more secure from industry standard perspective. So it will allow you to safely maintain your deployment. In terms of the prerequisite for setting up this solution, so you need to have the Arbortext Content Delivery 7140 installed. We are only supporting single sign-on from that version and on. You will also have to have the central authorization server, and our selection of choice here will be Pink Federate version 933 or above. We also provide a license to that version inside our download page, PTC download page. So you will be able to install and activate it directly from there, especially if you don't have Pink Federate yet in your organization, you will be able to leverage that. And there is also an auto configuration script that we provide also from our download page that will allow you to automatically configure the ACD related applications with Pink Federate. And I will go through that in more details in coming slides. A little bit about the different terminology or components of the single sign-on solution architecture. So I'll not go through the authentication, that's kind of self-explanatory. You want to be able to authenticate with the federated identity that you get from the LDAP or corporate Active Directory. So that's going to be the identity provider here on the list. Then you have the central authorization server, which is really the entity that's responsible for distributing and validating the OAuth tokens used for the authentication and authorization services. And that's basically used to secure delegated access to server resources on behalf of the resource owner. What it fundamentally means is that it specifies a process for resource owners to authorize third-party access to their server resources without sharing their credentials, which is basically the underlying goal here with SSO configuration. Next, you will have the service provider. This is typically any web client application that's connected that you expect your end users to interact with. And it serves two purposes here. It provides a certain consumer service that's required for this SAML authentication, and it performs delegated authorization flows that's required for accessing one or multiple resource providers. And under the hood, what it basically do, it refers to an HTTP resource, often a virtual one, on an end website that processes the SAML protocol messages and returns a cookie that represents the information that's extracted from the message itself. And that's how the connection or binding is done. And lastly, the resource provider here, which is really the entity that's housing the user-owned resources that's accessible via typically REST APIs. And it also performs a kind of token validation during the delegated authorization to make sure that the call is authorized and properly secured. And just to give you a couple of examples here, the diagram on the bottom right represents an example of a typical deployment. Again, it's just an example, so you could configure Ping Federate with any of the ACD applications. This will actually come out of the box. You can connect it with additional service providers that could be any ERP portal or Salesforce, etc. The resource provider is really where the service providers will pull the content from. So this is typically could be, again, ACD or any delivery system or any part store or price and availability system, as well as Salesforce. And all of those are really streamlined into the Ping Federate server that centralizes all the authorization and authentication processes and connects with the IDP, with the identity provider. That's typically the LDAP, the federated server, or any other IDP that's deployed in your organization. In terms of the configuration process, I'll go through it in more details. So this is typically the flow that you will have to follow. You first install the Arbortext Content Delivery 7140, as well as the Ping Federate, if not already deployed in your organization. You need to prepare a couple of certificates during this process. Two certificates that are driven from the ACD Java directory, and another one that's being exported from Ping Federate itself. And the details are listed in the coming slides. Then you have to download the ACD automation script that's also available from the download webpage, as I mentioned, and you copy the two certificates that you just created earlier into an input directory that's located there. Then you need to enable the SSO configuration from the deployment configuration of configurator of ACD. At this point, you just configure everything. You do not restart the servers. Then you update a couple of scripts that are available within the script that you might, a couple of properties files, sorry, that are available in the script that you just downloaded, including the default properties and the user's properties. Then you run the automation script using a git bash to register all the configuration and set up the connection between Ping Federate as the IDP, as well as the the ACD application as service provider, as well as resource provider. And at this point, you will also see all the connections, the OAuth, as well as the service provider set up on the Pink Federate webpage. I'll go through it in coming slides. Once that's done, you need to run a couple of commands to import the certificates from the script into an output directory, and then copy the Pink Federate certificate that you just exported from the Pink Federate application into that Java custodies file. Once that's done, there is one last step that needs to be followed here, which is to export the service provider metadata file for each one of the service providers that you set up in Pink Federate, and then copy each one of those into the relevant ACD WAR files. And lastly, once everything is done, you just need to restart ACD server for the configuration to take effect from ACD side, and you are ready to go. A couple of highlights that you might want to consider while going through this process. So in terms of the certificates preparation, those are, I'm specifying here the relevant scripts that you need to follow. Those are the two certificates that need to be created. And the other one that's coming from Pink Federate, you just need to go to the security section on the IDP on Pink Federate and click export, and it will download the file that you need. And once that's done, you just need to copy those two files into the input directory of that auto configuration script directory structure that is specified here on the bottom left, and put it under the input folder. In terms of the configuration of SSO on the ACD deployment configurator, as I mentioned, there is a couple of properties that needs to be filled here. You need to go to an entity called SSO, and then enable the SSO configuration and simply fill in the host name and port of the Pink Federate, as well as create a CAS, or Central Authorization Server client secret, that will be used to do the handshake for the communication between ACD and the configuration script. This could be any string. You just need to make sure that later on you update the properties file on the script to have the same value. And then you should also create or give each one of the entities that you are going to connect with Pink Federate, such as the delivery application, the configurator, the task manager, any of the ACD apps, with a given prefix that's also going to be used later on to do the handshake with the script. Once everything is done from the configurator perspective, you are publishing the changes, but you are not restarting. So just click on that button over here. Next, you will have to go to the open the auto configuration script that you downloaded from PTC website and update a couple of properties files that's called default properties and user properties. The directions to those up are available in the PTC Identity and Access Management Help Center. Those are kind of generic and specific to the Pink Federate configuration. But we're also keeping a documentation of all the steps that are required for your convenience. In terms of the secret key, as I mentioned, I'm hoping that you can see it over here, but it's if you open the user properties, there is a file that's called, there's a property here that's called secret value. This needs to contain the same exact value that you just filled in the configurator. And from the default properties file, you need to give or use that prefix that we just mentioned for the relevant ACD application that you're going to set up. In this example, I'm configuring it with the delivery system and I'm giving it the DEL string, and that's what I'm going to use in here. Once completed and you are once completing filling these properties files, you need to execute those automation scripts using that command. And once completed, you will see both the service provider connection and the OAuth clients set up on Pink Federate UI. So this is the basic GUI or the relevant snapshots of the Pink Federate GUI with the service provider, as well as the relevant connections that you can see here on the top right. So you can see that after you go through this process, you will have a single SP connection set up. So in this example, this will be the last one here, ACD DEL. Just keep in mind that the script that we are going to provide is only going to take care of setting up single application, typically the delivery. So in order to set up additional ACD applications with Pink Federate as service providers, you need to, there are a couple of ways. You can obviously do it manually. You can tweak the relevant configuration files and then update everything manually, but the more recommended approach is to simply reuse what you have already set up. So in order to do this, you can just click on the existing SP connection and click copy, and then it will export everything, and you can just change the relevant pieces and then import it or create additional SP connection. This is much more straightforward and easy to follow. Once everything is done, as I mentioned earlier, you need to follow a couple of certificates, copying actions. So you need to copy all those 2 certificates that you just created in order to do the authentication between ACD and Pink Federate. This will be copied into the relevant Java from the output folder into the relevant ACD Java directory. You need to copy that Pink Federate certificate that you exported from Pink Federate into the ACD Java custards directory. And then you'll have to, again, export the metadata file for each one of the service providers. So if you can see here on the bottom right, I'll go through it in more details later on during the demo to show you how it looks like in case this is too small. But in each one of the service providers, there is also an action that allows you to export the metadata file. And once that's exported, this is the file that you will have to go and take and copy into the relevant ACD application WAR file. And the location for each one of those is located over here on the slide. And once everything is done, you are just restarting ACD and you're ready to go. That concludes the SSO deep dive piece. The next item I would like to follow is the customizations support. So the first capability that we introduced under this was a kind of version to version source comparison report that will basically allow you to easily compare or analyze the customizations while going through an upgrade process from one version to another. So this will save a lot of effort and confusion as well as costs while trying to map those or analyze this manually. So it will simply output a kind of differences report for all the things that have changed between those versions, and they point you to the relevant customization files that you may want to review and adjust as per the new version that you're going to upgrade to. So this is quite powerful, and it will allow you to upgrade to later versions more easily and with less costs around maintaining your customizations. As for how this process works, so there are fundamentally 3 folders that are being created as part of this. So the entire analysis or comparison report process is called safe area. And it consists of basically 3 types of folders or directories that you need to maintain while going through this process. The PTC current, that's the place where you install we'll keep the latest version of that you're going to update to. The PTC orig, that's basically the original or the old out-of-the-box version. And the site mode, this is typically going to be your existing customized version. And I'll go through with more details on each one of those in later slides on why you need each one of those, but it's important for you to understand the differences and the use of each one. Once the process is complete, you will get a report, Excel spreadsheet that lists all the differences that really might impact your customizations between those two versions. And that report will be available again under a directory that's called WT area. So in terms of the process you need to follow, so the first thing you need to do is to create a safe area folder structure. There is a command that we are exposing to allow you to automatically do that. Once that's done, you need to place the old out-of-the-box files, typically the SW folder and downwards, into the PTC orig folder that I just mentioned earlier. You need to place the old customized version, basically the currently deployed version that you have, in the site mode folder, again, with the SW and onwards, and also create an empty work folder under it. Once that's done, you need to run a command to deploy the customizations into the software directory. And I will go through in more details on what that means in a second. Once the preparation steps are done, you need to open the installer in an upgrade mode, and then there will be an option that allows you to generate a comparison report. Once that's complete, you will get that report spreadsheet under that WT area directory. And once you are doing with all your analysis and deciding which customizations you want to carry forward and update, you need to update the old PTC current files, basically the new version that you are going to upgrade to, with the desired customization. So basically, every customizations that you would like to maintain in the new version will have to be pushed forward and merged into what exists in the site mode directory. Once everything done and you have alignment of what you want to support in terms of customizations in the new version, you need to run the installer one more time, now with the complete option, complete mode. This will actually follow the actual installation process and again, deploy all of the customizations that you are carrying forward. Once everything is done, you need to run another command to propagate all the custom file changes from the site mode to the new ACD upgraded deployment. And that concludes the process. In terms of a couple of highlights that you might want to follow throughout this process. So as I mentioned, in order to create the safe area directories, you need to run this command over here. In order to prepare the content that's relevant for each one of those folder structures, again, for the PTC orig, you need to take the SW directory and put it under PTC orig. The current customized version, again, same thing, just copy the entire SW directory and put it under site mode. And yeah, there is another point that I wanted to mention here. No need to copy the new out-of-the-box versions into PTC current directory. This will be taken care of by the actual upgrade process. So PTC current is really a folder that you don't need to touch throughout this process. Once everything is done, you need to run another command to align the existing custom software version with what you have in the site mode using that command over here. You need to then run the installer, launch the installer, and then click on that generate version comparison report option. And this will generate this report that you're seeing over here. And this is typically how the report will look like. There are two tabs. one that consists of all the files that has been changed while comparing the old to the new. So every file that exists in the old and exists in both places basically and change will show up over here. And it will contain a direct path to where to find it. And it will allow you to easily identify it and adjust accordingly. And there is another tab that's called missed deleted files that will contain all the files that no longer exist in the newer version, with some justification on why this was done. In most cases, it's just because we improved things and removed those files from out of the box. But this is typically for kind of your information. Once or throughout the process of analyzing the customization, this is just an example of how this typically look like in the, for example, I just gave an example of the web.xml file before and after, or original versus custom. So in this case, there used to be a based form authentication, based authentication, which we customized to include form-based authentication. And keep in mind that every change that you are doing throughout this process that requires compilation, for example, if those are Java files, needs to be taken care of before you merge your custom files back to the site mode. So the process itself will not take care of compiling your customizations. Once the analysis and the merging of the customizations is done, you need to, again, run the installer and now choose the complete option to complete the upgrade process. And this process will basically install and replace all the files with the new files that exist in the site mode directory. And at this point, the PTC current folder is no longer relevant, and it will be similar to what exists in the site mode. And there will be another command that you need to propagate, you need to execute to propagate all the custom files from the site mode to the desired software location into the source code itself using this command. And just to conclude, everything that I followed is applicable to 7.1, 4, and onwards, but we also provided an option or a script that's also documented that will allow you to run this analysis or comparison report against your existing 6.4 or earlier 7.1 versions. And the process is pretty much similar, but it's a different process or script that you need to follow. It will not be embedded inside our installer. The second piece of the customizations support that we introduced in this version includes a couple of key capabilities that will allow you to retire any of the custom work that you used to maintain manually in prior versions and handle those through an out-of-the-box GUI-driven configuration points. So that starts with the logo and background color modification. We introduced a preference that allows you to control it directly from the administration utility. There is a system integration point for pricing systems as well as ordering system configuration. There is an option to add or modify dynamic types such as users, cards, notes, attributes. Again, through the UI with no further effort to customize any style sheets or configuration files. And lastly, another configuration point for shopping parameters that will allow you to effectively integrate with the price and availability system and have the prices and availability information change based on certain shopping parameters that are followed in your organization. So now we'll go through each one of those in more detail. So again, in terms of the logo replacement, this is, we introduced a preference that's called application logo that's available on our preferences section of the administration utility. Keep in mind that we are only supporting PNG format, no larger than this size. And after you update it, you'll also have to restart ACD. And another preference that allows you to change the background color of the header. Again, you need to just provide a relevant RGB code in that preference, and in this case, there will be no need for restart. Price and ordering system integration. This is another powerful capability that will allow you to remove the need for configuring or customizing this through manual files. It's only taking care of obviously setting up the connection. In terms of the actual customization logic, you'll have the delegates that exist before still in place in order to put any logic that you need to follow in your, that's specific to your integration needs and relevant system. We are providing a wide variety of integration points, starting from a REST request, simple object access protocol, as well as Java database connectivity. And all are available through the configurator. I'll go through it in a couple of minutes here. In terms of the ability to add or modify dynamic types attributes, it's also now available through the attribute section of our administration utility. So you can easily browse through those and see which, or either change an existing attribute label, as well as add new and have the new attributes automatically added to the ACD layout without further investment in modifying the style sheets. It will be automatically be added. And lastly, the shopping parameters, as I mentioned, again, it's also a configuration point that we added in the attribute section of the administration utility that will allow you to set up simple as well as complex cascading mapping between one or multiple shopping parameters. So for example, if you want to tie specific logic and have certain subset of location parameter assigned to each and every customer parameter, you will be able to define that mapping and have this reflected automatically in the UI directly using this utility. And once the definitions are done from the admin utility, any end user that will be having access to the price and availability information or the ability to place an order will get that dialog that will force him to select the relevant shopping parameters before submitting the order or before seeing the relevant price and availability information. And now I'll jump directly to the a quick demonstration script that I want to follow here. It will start with a system administrator that set up the configuration with the price and availability or ordering system in the configurator. Then I'll show you how the system admin sets up a couple of new attributes and add those to the shopping cart, as well as to the shopping parameter section of the admin utility. Then I'll switch roles here, and as the technician end user, I'll show you how those shopping parameters are reflected and behaving on the ACD delivery application. And then once I'm done and I want to submit or place an order or basically create a quote out of the cart, I might as well export that cart information with everything that I just added in terms of custom attribute and have it exported into some Excel spreadsheet or any other form that you can send on directly to your dealership. And lastly, I will show you how the dealer or technician places the order and have all the information, including custom attributes, reflected in the order. I'll quickly go through the beginning here. So as I mentioned, the configurator holds all the new configuration points now for the SSO as well as the integration. So the SSO will take care of all the setup and connectivity to Ping Federate. And once everything is done, you're connecting all your applications whether if it's PTC hosted or external, you will be able to seamlessly sign in across all with the single credentials. In terms of the integration, this entity here allows you to set up connectivity with a price and availability system as well as ordering systems. So in this example, I just use a simple JDBC connection just to mimic the connectivity, but this might as well be an actual ERP system or e-commerce where you store the price and availability information. And once that's done, I'm going through the preferences section. So as I mentioned, we have introduced a couple of new preferences here, starting from the application logo, the header color code, so we can easily change the logo background from here. And as I just did, I changed it from blank to this RGB code. And as you can see, it's automatically reflected upon refreshing the page. In terms of attributes section, we've introduced the list of existing dynamic types that we support, starting from shopping carts, orders, feedback, user, service group, as well as shopping parameters. And for each one of those, you will see the list of relevant attributes. You can easily add additional attributes. And as I just did here, I added 2 new attributes that's called shipping address and billing address to the list. Now I'm switching gears and taking the role of the end user technician that uses the delivery application. Once I'm logging in and trying to see price and availability information, I'll have this shopping parameters dialog pop up, and this will allow me to switch between the relevant shopping parameters that are relevant for me. So let's assume that I want to now see Minneapolis instead of Eagan. And just to show you how this supposed to look like, this is the database table that's from which the price and or any other content is pulled from. I'm just going to change this value here from 150 to 200. And then when I'm clicking on that, this is the part that's applying the changes for it. You will see that it automatically picks up the 200. And for example, if I'm changing now to Eagan, I will see that it will be switching to 100. So let's quickly do that. So it's completely dynamic and allows you to seamlessly integrate the content that's coming from the price and availability system. And now it's 100. Once I'm viewing the part that I want to use, I would like to add those to my cart. So I'm just clicking add to cart here. And then I will go back to the shopping cart page. And directly from here, I can see the new attributes, the custom attributes which I just added. Let's just put some names in it so we'll be able to see. And let's assume that I want to generate some quote or export that content out of ACD into some Excel spreadsheet. Just for the sake of the example, I'm exporting it. I might as well use the email to send it directly via email. And when I'm opening that cart export under the cart information, you will see that it contains all the relevant cart line items as well as any of the attributes that I just filled in, the custom attributes. So with that, let's go back to, again, you can also place an order if you want to complete the process here from the e-commerce and flow perspective. And you will have all the custom attributes reflected downstream to the order. Now let me go back to the presentation and I'll continue with my slides here. Next capability that we introduced in this version was the ACD SIM alignments, and we applied a couple of improvements there as well. First thing that we did in terms of the content delivery report that allows you to compare and see what content out of SIM has been published or not yet published into ACD. Up until now, it only supported dynamic documents, which are kind of inclined towards Arbortext type of content, and but we now extended it with support for WT documents, so it now can contain any type of document that could be maintained in SIM. And as you can see, this is just an example that I'm sharing here. The first 5 are kind of the dynamic document. It includes any of the graphics and as well as part list, etc. And you have the last 4 that capturing documents that are captured currently as WT documents. You can see what version has been, what is the latest version in the source system, which is kind of the SIM system in our example, and what is the latest version that has been pushed forward to the delivery system, which is ACD. So just to give you a couple of examples, it's tracking content that not yet published, as well as content that published but not up to the latest version, such as this one over here. You can see that engine 250cc version on the SIM side is B1, whereas in the delivery system it's still A1. So it's giving you a good perspective on what the latest published status of ACD, and you can also redirect to see the relevant page of the SIM content directly from this eye icon and complete the publish for things that are not yet published. The next capability that we introduced, or alignment, is the ability to control the logic, the merging logic between the effectivities that are defined on part list line items as well as parts. So that's called usage versus all effectivity. Up until now, there used to be some limited capabilities that were introduced in ACD. We only supported an intersection between the two in ACD, whereas in SIM, you might as well add more flexibility. So you could define anything basically on both the part line item or the usage effectivity as well as the all. And this caused a couple of inconsistencies while trying to publish the effectivities that are defined and in SIM, and created some mismatch while trying to view those in ACD. But now in ACD, we are exposing kind of part service effectivity merging logic that allows you to set the desired logic between how to combine those effectivities that are defined on the usage versus all. So you can select between intersection or union. By default, we are still using intersection, which means that if you have different models on each, intersection will lead to nothing, as well as union will lead to showing both. So in this example, if you are following the intersection, you need to make sure that there is at least some overlap between the two, the all and the uses. And if not, that's actually a more desired approach. We recommend you to maintain the effectivity on either one of those, but not both, so that you will not reduce the chances of things to go wrong. And that's pretty much from this feature perspective. There is a couple of examples here that you can refer to. The last, the second item here is the thumbnail support. So in this version, we are now providing you with an ability to load multiple, or maintain and load multiple thumbnails for each one of the information structures in SIM, and then identify the default that you want to set for ACD. And another capability is the ability to when there is no thumbnail image for a given information element that's sitting under an information structure, ACD is now capable of fetching and using the one that's available on the information structure. So it will allow you to be more flexible and make sure that you are not missing any thumbnail for the information elements. Lastly, in terms of additional improvement that we just follow, and I know that we are reaching the top of the hour here. In terms of scalability improvements, we introduced or kind of organized the architecture of ACD to be able to consume much larger data sets, especially around parts lists that contains thousands of parts. And we improve the performance and the ability to navigate between assemblies to sub-assemblies directly from the part list. In terms of cloud deployments improvements, we introduced a couple of key capabilities that will allow you to seamlessly deploy and maintain the connectivity between SIEM and ACD, both hosted on cloud, using a transform and load process that could be triggered from an SFTP. And we are also supporting the transform and load process of zip bundles to reduce the file storage that's needed during the transport. In terms of a new concept of hotfixes installer we introduced, this installer will basically take care of automatically applying or deploying any patch that we may be giving to you in a kind of automatic way without the need for you to go and tweak certain files manually, removing the risks of error when applying hotfixes. So the process itself will be quite similar to the way that we install and deploy CPSs, for instance. And lastly, a couple of improvements around administration and software compatibility. We introduced a way to customize your log messages for ACD while changing the log priorities as well as the messages that will be reflected for each one. And we also updated our third-party software compatibility for Oracle from 12c to 19 and updated the FlexNet publisher to the latest version, 11.16.2.1. Just to conclude here, I want to kind of pause and show you a couple of key kind of references that I would recommend you to follow while attempting to deploy and benefit from those new capabilities. So those are the resources that are available on our PTC website, the technical support that contains a full list of all the documentation that's relevant for ACD, the online admin, as well as user help center. We also introduced 2 new self-training videos that are also available from the PTC download webpage. And in there, you will also be able to see a couple of references that are required for the SSO or the pink federate configuration. And in terms of the full list of ACD documentation resources, this is the full list that's available and coming through in 7.1.4, starting from the read this first and getting started throughout the software compatibility, the deployment, the customization guide, the upgrade guide, as well as the online help documentation. All are available and linked throughout our PTC support website.